You're full of dignity, full of yourself. But if you only could see that your eyes could open and you could see what happened, what really transpired, for he had to come from heaven. He had to bear that sorrow, that grief. No one before, none of the patriarchs, none of the prophets, no one was qualified. No one was qualified. A certain transaction took place in that garden. For he must partake of that cup. He must drink of the cup of God's wrath. He must drink of the cup of iniquity. He was holy. Are you listening to what I'm saying? He had to bear the sins of many. He had to bear their transgressions. And here in the garden, he was so, listen, when it said an angel came from heaven strengthening him, because the weight of the sin of the whole world, of the ages of creation, not only of man, but of everything that the Father created through him. Listen to me. Everything was in that fall. Everything was in that fall. The whole universe. Everything, the weight of the universe, of the created and uncreated worlds were upon him. For he must bear their iniquities, their sins, from that one man's fall. And Adam's tears was not enough. Adam's intercession or supplication was not enough. You understand what I'm saying? Could not. For the Father, listen, it was... How could I describe this? Lord, help me. I want you to understand what happened here. For us, we take our salvation for granted. For us, we take this gospel message on the surface. For him, for eternity, the angels were beholding him. The Father beheld his Son carry the grief, because, listen to me, like I said to you, he is the head of the human race. By him were all things created. Remember that. Through him the Father created everything, and everything that was created through him. And for all those things that were created through him to be reconciled, he has to be the vehicle. He was the vehicle by which everything was created, and he has to be the vehicle by which everything is reconciled back. Are you getting this? Was there anyone worthy, anyone better qualified that could have reconciled all things? He was the owner, the head of the human race, of all creation, heaven, earth, and under the earth, visible and invisible, whether they be thrones or dominions. Are you listening to what I'm saying? He carried the whole of, not just of the moment, but of all the ages. Of the ages before, of the time and the dispensation in which he was and which they rejected him. He came to his own, and they did what? They rejected him, right? And of all the ages to come, here he was, carrying the grief, feeling, making confession, supplication with strong cryings. The book of Hebrews tells us that he was heard. He cried to God who was able to save him. He said, listen, he made confessions. Listen to what I have to say. This is going to blow your mind away. He cried the cry you couldn't cry, so that you don't have to cry the cry he has cried. Are you listening to what I say? What did I say? No, you don't understand. What did I just say? He cried the cry you couldn't cry, because you had no strength to cry. He so cried that an angel came from heaven to strengthen him. And when the angel strengthened him, he continued in sorrow. They heard him. The disciples, where they were, they heard him. They felt his sorrow, his grief. And the same, when they heard his voice and heard him making intercession, supplication, pleading for mercy, when they heard him, the same sorrow filled them. They were filled with sorrow. They couldn't utter a word. They were overwhelmed just beholding him. They have never seen any man like that. He, as the son with his father, was holding to his father and making intercession. Are you with me? It was that one night in Gethsemane that the case was settled. It was that one night that the cry of creation and the universe came before the Father. For one man had to lift a cry. Understand me? I said, I have not started to teach you or to preach to you. You haven't understood. I'm trying to lay this in a very simple way for you to understand. Ifoma, do you understand? Listen. You know, when I look at Christians, you go to church now, 21 days, you're crying, you're doing this, you're doing that. It's because you didn't know what has already happened on your behalf. You understand me? The angel from heaven strengthening him. And he continued. Because, oh, praise God. Listen, the weight of the sin of fallen humanity, of everyone that is to be born, of every generation, of every dispensation, every single one was played out before him. You were, he saw you, he knew you. All the atrocities, all things. He must drink of that cup. He must. And he was filled with grief more than anyone could have ever known. It was so much for his body to contain, to absorb, that it reached the point where it crossed the borderline of humanity. And which is what I say to you, listen to me. The blood, you see, when you sweat and cry and groan and go to the depth where you cross the borderline of the flesh, and there is no more water coming out of you, and you are pressing deeper and deeper, blood starts to come forth from the pores of your flesh and of your skin, and it's blood that began to come out instead of water, instead of tears. And they said the sweat was as great drops of blood falling out of him. Blood. He shed blood from his flesh before he even went to the cross. That is what we take for granted. So when you say you repented, you are supposed to be filled with godly sorrow, isn't it? Because it's supposed to play in a flash before you. When you come to church, you play religion, you do what you like, you play games, you get entertained, you get excited, and that's all that it is. For you, that's all that it is.